The Galactic Academy's training grounds were filled with chatter, excitement buzzing in the air. Today marked one of the most anticipated events of the year, the annual strength trials. It was the day when students from all corners of the galaxy would showcase their physical prowess in various challenges, hoping to win glory for themselves and their home planets. Competitors of all shapes and sizes gathered, towering giants from high-gravity worlds, insectoid species with lightning-fast reflexes, and even aquatic beings, their gel-filled suits keeping them hydrated under the Academy's atmospheric conditions. Despite the variety, there was one individual whose name echoed louder than any other: Gorak, the reigning arm wrestling champion. Gorak hailed from the high-gravity planet Graxus, where physical strength was a necessity for survival. He was easily the most imposing figure at the Academy, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with muscles that bulged beneath his thick, gray skin. Each movement seemed to resonate with pure power. For 5 consecutive years, Gorak had crushed every opponent, his victories almost effortless, his arm unmovable. He was more a symbol of dominance than a mere student. As students filled the grand arena, there was a palpable energy in the air. The arena itself was an impressive structure, a dome made of translucent material, showing the vast expanse of space beyond. Sunlight filtered through, casting intricate reflections on the ground, where students gathered in anticipation. Spectators from every department of the Academy filled the seats, creating a kaleidoscope of colors and forms. There were beings with glimmering scales, others with skin that shifted colors in response to their emotions, and even those with multiple limbs, all waiting to witness Gorak's next triumph. Gorak himself stood near the arm wrestling platform, a broad smile on his face, exuding confidence. His large, 3-fingered hands flexed in anticipation as he eyed the competition. He had faced challengers from all over the galaxy, some were even considered the strongest on their respective planets. Yet, no one had ever managed to push his arm back even a few centimeters. To him, today was just another opportunity to showcase his superiority. The head of the trials, Professor Lorcan, a tall insectoid creature with multifaceted eyes, raised one of his spindly arms, signaling for the crowd to quiet down. "Attention, students of the Galactic Academy." His voice echoed, amplified through the speakers embedded in the arena walls. "Today we celebrate not just strength but courage, the courage to face challenges head-on, regardless of the odds. Step forward, those who wish to challenge our reigning champion, Gorak of Graxus." There was a moment of silence, followed by a few murmurs as several challengers stepped forward, massive beings with equally impressive physiques, each one a potential competitor for Gorak. The crowd cheered as the challengers lined up, each hoping to be the one who could finally dethrone the champion. Gorak looked at them, his smile widening. To him, none of them posed a real threat. He had seen their kind before, strong, yes, but lacking the raw, brute power that only a Graxian could possess. And then, something unexpected happened. From the back of the crowd, a figure stepped forward, smaller, almost unnoticeable among the towering challengers. Ethan, a human from Earth, made his way to the front, his expression calm and composed. The crowd's reaction was immediate, a mix of gasps, laughter, and disbelief. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, but not for their physical strength. They were admired for their adaptability, their resilience, and their ingenuity. But in a contest of sheer physical power, they were considered far from formidable. Ethan wasn't what most would call imposing. Standing at an average height, with a lean, athletic build, he seemed almost out of place amidst the hulking figures of the other challengers. His short, brown hair was slightly disheveled, and his green eyes scanned the crowd with a hint of determination. He wore the standard Academy uniform, a simple, dark blue suit that did little to add to his presence. Yet there was something about the way he carried himself that made a few spectators pause. "Is he serious?" someone in the crowd whispered, a reptilian student with scales shimmering a confused green. "Does he really think he stands a chance against Gorak?" Gorak's laughter boomed across the arena, a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to shake the very air. "A human? he bellowed, his voice dripping with amusement. "You wish to challenge me, Earthling? Do you even know what you're getting yourself into?" Ethan simply nodded, his expression unchanging. He stepped forward, standing directly across from Gorak. The contrast between the two couldn't have been more stark. Gorak, with his colossal frame and powerful muscles, and Ethan, looking almost fragile in comparison. The platform was set a sturdy metallic table with embedded sensors to measure the pressure and force exerted by each participant. Ethan placed his hand on the table, his fingers wrapping around the handle designed to keep the competitors steady. Gorak did the same, his massive hand dwarfing Ethan's. The crowd roared in excitement. This was going to be interesting, if only to see how quickly Gorak could end it. The betting began almost immediately, with most students betting against the human. The odds were clear. Ethan didn't stand a chance. Professor Lorcan raised his arm once more. "Competitors ready?" He called out, his multifaceted eyes glinting under the light. Ethan nodded, his eyes locking onto Gorak's, while Gorak grinned, already imagining his victory. "Begin." The moment Lorcan's arm dropped, Gorak pushed with all his might, fully intending to end the match in a single swift movement. But something unexpected happened. Ethan's arm didn't budge. It held firm, resisting the enormous force Gorak was exerting. The smile on Gorak's face faltered, replaced by a look of mild confusion. He pushed harder, his muscles bulging, veins protruding from his gray skin. Yet Ethan's arm remained steady. The crowd, which had been cheering and laughing, fell silent. The murmurs of disbelief began to ripple through the arena. How was this possible? Gorak was using his full strength, and yet, the human, this fragile being from a low-gravity world, was holding his own. Ethan's face was a mask of concentration. It wasn't just about strength, he knew that. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying Gorak's previous matches, analyzing his technique, his weaknesses. He knew that Gorak relied entirely on his brute strength, and that was his biggest flaw. Ethan had trained his body to withstand immense pressure, had practiced leveraging his weight, using the opponent's force against them. It wasn't just about overpowering Gorak, it was about outsmarting him. Slowly, Gorak's expression changed from confusion to frustration. He gritted his teeth, his eyes narrowing as he focused all his energy into his arm. The sensors embedded in the table began to flash, indicating the increasing pressure. Gorak roared, the muscles in his arm quivering as he pushed with everything he had. Ethan felt the strain, his arm trembling under the immense pressure. His muscles burned, his fingers ached, but he didn't let up. He focused on his breathing, keeping his movements controlled, using the techniques he had practiced over and over again. He could feel the force Gorak was applying, and instead of resisting it head-on, he adjusted his grip slightly, allowing Gorak's strength to work against him. The crowd watched in stunned silence. This was not how they had expected the match to go. Gorak, the unbeatable champion, was struggling, his arm trembling as he tried to overpower the human. Ethan, on the other hand, remained focused, his eyes never leaving Gorak's. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Ethan began to push back. Gorak's eyes widened in disbelief as he felt his arm being forced back. He tried to regain control, to use his full strength to push Ethan's arm down, but it was no use. Ethan's technique, his leverage, and his sheer determination were too much. The crowd erupted into shouts and gasps as they watched Gorak's arm slowly being pushed closer and closer to the table. Sweat began to bead on Gorak's forehead, his breathing growing ragged. He could feel his strength waning, his muscles reaching their limit. Ethan, however, seemed to grow stronger, his focus unwavering. With one final, powerful push, Ethan forced Gorak's arm down, slamming it onto the table. The sensors flashed red, signaling the end of the match. For a moment there was silence, a stunned, disbelieving silence. The entire arena seemed frozen in time, as if no one could quite comprehend what had just happened. Gorak, the invincible champion of Graxis, had been defeated by a human. Ethan released his grip, standing up slowly, his breathing heavy but controlled. He looked at Gorak, giving him a respectful nod. The silence was broken by a roar of applause and cheers. The crowd erupted, students jumping to their feet, shouting in amazement and excitement. Ethan had done the impossible. He had defeated Gorak. The whispers turned into shouts, and soon the entire arena was filled with the sound of students chanting Ethan's name. Gorak stared at his arm, still resting on the table, his expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. Slowly he looked up at Ethan, who extended his hand. For a moment Gorak hesitated, his pride wounded. But then he reached out, shaking Ethan's hand, a smile breaking across his face. "You fought well, human," he said, his voice low but filled with respect. "You are stronger than you look." Ethan smiled, nodding. "It's not just about strength," he replied. "It's about knowing how to use it." The crowd continued to cheer as Ethan stepped off the platform, his heart still pounding in his chest. He had done it. He had proven that humans, despite their perceived weaknesses, could stand toe-to-toe with the strongest beings in the galaxy. And in doing so, he had earned the respect of not just Gorak, but of the entire academy. As he walked away from the platform, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was just the beginning. There were many more challenges ahead, many more battles to fight. But today he had taken the first step in showing the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. The shock of the arm wrestling match lingered in the air long after the cheering had subsided. Ethan had done what many thought was impossible. He had defeated Gorak, the reigning champion from Graxus, in front of the entire Galactic Academy. As Ethan walked away from the platform, he could feel hundreds of eyes on him, alien eyes of all shapes, colors, and sizes. Some stared at him in disbelief, others with newfound respect, and a few even with a hint of envy. But what mattered to Ethan most was that he had earned something greater than just a victory. He had earned the Academy's attention. Gorak remained at the table for a moment longer, staring at his defeated arm as if it had betrayed him. He clenched his jaw, his pride wounded. He had faced countless challengers from across the galaxy, many of whom were physically stronger and more powerful than this human. Yet here he was, defeated by a creature that most considered one of the weaker species in terms of raw physical capability. It stung a deep, bitter sting that echoed in the pit of his stomach. Slowly, Gorak stood, shaking his head as he looked at Ethan's retreating figure. This human had something that others did not: a quiet but unbreakable determination. Professor Lorcan, who had presided over the trials, stepped forward, his spindly limbs swaying slightly. His multifaceted eyes, which reflected the entire arena, focused on Ethan as he spoke through the speaker system. "Today we have witnessed something remarkable. Strength is not just about muscle or size, it is about spirit, strategy, and resilience. Ethan of Earth has shown us that even the most unlikely of us can achieve greatness if we are willing to challenge our limits." The crowd erupted into applause once again, but this time it was not the raucous cheering of a spectacle. It was an applause of acknowledgement, respect for the quiet human who had stood up to the might of Graxis and emerged victorious. Ethan felt a swell of pride at the professor's words. His journey at the academy had not been easy. He was one of only a handful of humans, and many of the alien students had looked at him with amusement, dismissing him as someone who wouldn't last. Today he had taken the first step to change that perception. As Ethan walked away from the platform, a small group of students rushed towards him, their expressions a mix of excitement and curiosity. The group consisted of beings from different parts of the galaxy: a tall insectoid with delicate, glistening wings, a stocky reptilian with scales that seemed to shimmer, and a slender, plant-like creature whose skin had a soft green hue. "How did you do it, human?" The reptilian student, whose name was Kral, asked, his voice a low hiss of curiosity. His yellow eyes fixed on Ethan with a hint of disbelief. "I have never seen Gorak lose before. What is your secret?" Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "It wasn't easy. It's not just about strength. Gorak is incredibly strong, probably stronger than anyone I've faced. But I spent a lot of time studying his technique, looking for any weaknesses I could exploit. I realized that he relies entirely on his raw power. That's where I had an opening. I focused on maintaining my position and using his strength against him. The insectoid student, whose wings fluttered slightly in excitement, tilted her head. "That's fascinating," she said in a high-pitched voice. "You used his strength to create leverage, didn't you?" "That's a clever approach. Most challengers would just try to overpower him directly." Ethan nodded. "Exactly. I knew I couldn't match him in sheer force. But if I could withstand his initial push and use his momentum, I could force him into a position where he was vulnerable." The students around him exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of respect and newfound admiration. To many of them, Ethan was not just a human anymore, he was a peer, someone who had proven himself worthy of being at the academy. It was a moment that marked a shift in how they saw him, and, perhaps, how they saw humans as a whole. Before long, Gorak himself approached the group. The crowd parted as the towering figure of the Graxian moved forward, his heavy footsteps echoing in the now quieter arena. The students around Ethan fell silent, their eyes wide with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. No one was sure how Gorak would react. Would he be angry, humiliated, or even aggressive? Gorak stopped in front of Ethan, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the human. For a moment there was silence, an uneasy, tense silence that seemed to stretch on. Then Gorak extended his massive hand. Ethan looked up, meeting Gorak's eyes. There was no malice there, no anger, only respect. "You fought well, human," Gorak said, his deep voice resonating with sincerity. "You have earned this victory. I will not forget it." Ethan smiled, shaking Gorak's hand firmly. "Thank you, Gorak. It was an honor to compete with you." Gorak nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Next time, I will be ready. Don't think I'll go easy on you again," he added, his voice carrying a hint of humor. Ethan laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less." With that, Gorak turned and walked away, his massive form disappearing into the crowd. The students around Ethan let out a collective breath, the tension dissipating as they began to speak all at once, their voices filled with excitement. Ethan felt a sense of relief. He had been unsure of how Gorak would take the defeat, but it seemed that even the mighty Graxian could respect a worthy opponent. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations and questions. Ethan found himself surrounded by students who were eager to know more about his training, his techniques, and his thoughts on the match. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt truly accepted. He was no longer just the human, he was Ethan, a competitor who had earned his place among them. Later that evening, Ethan made his way back to his quarters, exhaustion finally beginning to set in. The adrenaline that had fueled him throughout the day was fading, replaced by a deep fatigue. He pushed open the door to his room, a small but comfortable space with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out into the vastness of space. He sank onto his bed, letting out a long breath. It had been a long journey to get to this point. When Ethan had first arrived at the Galactic Academy, he had felt completely out of place. The Academy was a place where the best and brightest from across the galaxy came to learn, to train, to push themselves to their limits. It was a place where beings with extraordinary abilities and strengths gathered, and in comparison, Ethan had felt small, insignificant. He remembered his first day at the Academy, walking through the halls as towering aliens passed by, barely giving him a second glance. He had heard the whispers, the laughter. Humans were not known for their physical prowess, and many students had openly questioned why someone like Ethan would even bother attending. But Ethan had been determined. He had come to the Academy not just to prove himself, but to prove that humans were capable of greatness, even in the face of overwhelming odds. He had trained relentlessly, spending hours in the gym, pushing his body to its limits. He had studied the techniques of other students, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses, looking for ways to compensate for his own lack of physical power. It hadn't been easy. There had been times when he had doubted himself, times when he had wondered if he was in over his head, but he had never given up. He had kept pushing, kept striving, and today it had all paid off. As he lay on his bed, staring up at the ceiling, Ethan couldn't help but smile. Today was just the beginning. There were still many challenges ahead, many more obstacles to overcome. But for the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. He had earned the respect of his peers, and he had shown that humans were capable of standing shoulder to shoulder with the best the galaxy had to offer. A soft chime sounded, indicating that someone was at his door. Ethan sat up, curious. He wasn't expecting any visitors. He stood and walked over to the door, pressing the button to open it. Standing in the doorway was Professor Lorcan, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the light from the hallway. "Professor," Ethan said, surprised. "What brings you here?" Professor Lorcan tilted his head, his antennae twitching slightly. "I wanted to speak with you, Ethan," he said, his voice calm. "May I come in?" "Of course," Ethan replied, stepping aside to let the professor enter. Lorcan moved into the room, his long limbs moving with a fluid grace. He turned to face Ethan, his eyes studying him intently. "I must say, Ethan, your performance today was quite impressive," Lorcan said. "You have shown not only strength but also strategy and determination. These are qualities that are highly valued here at the Academy." "Thank you, Professor," Ethan said, feeling a swell of pride. "It means a lot to hear that." Lorcan nodded, his antennae twitching again. "I have come to speak with you because I believe you have potential that goes beyond just physical strength. The way you analyzed Gorek's technique, the way you used his own strength against him, it shows a level of strategic thinking that is rare among our students." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. I just did what I thought was necessary to win." "Precisely," Lorcan said. "You did what was necessary. You adapted, you thought critically, and you executed your plan flawlessly. These are the qualities of a true leader, Ethan, and that is why I am here to offer you a place in an advanced training program." Ethan blinked, taken aback. "Advanced training program? But I'm just a first-year student." "Yes, and that is precisely why this offer is so significant," Lorcan said. "The advanced training program is typically reserved for upper-level students, those who have already proven themselves. But I believe that you have the potential to excel in this program. It will be challenging, far more demanding than anything you have faced so far. But I believe you are ready for it." Ethan felt a mix of emotions: excitement, fear, disbelief. This was an incredible opportunity, one that could open doors for him that he had never even imagined. But it was also daunting. The advanced training program was known for its intensity, its rigorous demands. It was a place where only the best of the best thrived. I don't know what to say," Professor Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Lorcan tilted his head again, a faint smile playing across his mandibles. "You do not need to decide right now, Ethan. Take some time to think about it. But know this: you have already proven that you belong here. You have shown that humans are capable of greatness, and I believe that you have only just begun to tap into your true potential." With that, Lorcan turned and made his way to the door, pausing for a moment before looking back at Ethan. "Whatever you decide, know that you have my respect, Ethan, and the respect of many others at this academy." Ethan watched as the professor left, the door sliding shut behind him. He stood there for a moment, his mind racing. The advanced training program, it was an opportunity that he couldn't pass up. It was a chance to prove himself even further, to show that humans could excel not just in strength but in strategy, in leadership. It was a chance to push himself to new heights. He took a deep breath, a smile slowly spreading across his face. Today had been a victory, but it was just the beginning. There were still many more challenges ahead, many more battles to fight, and Ethan was ready for them. He had proven himself today, but tomorrow he would prove even more. He would show the galaxy that humans were capable of greatness, that they were capable of anything.